Let her in. And give her Engine 7.
Sir Feng, with respect, Buenos Aires, she was found sleeping outside Gate 7 last night. No ID, no credentials, no certification on record. Look at you two. Do you really think you belong here in rags and an outdated suit?
Let her in and give her Engine 7. Marcus Reed said it slowly, like a man who had nothing left to lose. He didn't look up, didn't adjust his tie, didn't explain himself. He just stared at the floor of the hangar, the same floor he had paced for 3 years, watching the best engineering minds in the world walk in with confidence and walk out with excuses for $1 billion, 12 grounded aircraft, one airline bleeding to death on the runway. His head of operations cleared his throat. Sir, with respect, she was found sleeping outside Gate 7 last night. No ID, no credentials, no certification on record. She is not qualified to be within 50 meters of this equipment, let alone. She's been watching us for 3 years. The room fell still. Marcus finally looked up. Every morning, same spot, outside the glass, watching your certified engineers fail at the same problem, in the same way, every single day. He straightened his jacket. And last night, while your team was in a 5-star hotel, writing another report I'll never read, she was outside in the cold, drawing engine diagrams in the concrete with a piece of broken glass. He picked up a photograph from the table and placed it in front of his operations director. The diagrams were precise, detailed beyond anything their internal team had produced. Cross-sections, heat mapping, fracture point indicators, all drawn freehand. In the dark, no one spoke. Her name is Grace, Marcus said quietly, and as of this moment, she is the only person in this building I trust with Engine 7. He turned toward the door. Someone get her a uniform, get her the tools she needs, and get every one of your engineers out of her way. The door opened. She walked in, barefoot, quiet, eyes moving directly to Engine 7 before she had fully crossed the threshold, like she had already been inside 1,000 times. In her mind, one of the senior engineers folded his arms, whispered something in German to the man beside him. They both smiled. Grace didn't look at them. She crouched beside the engine, placed her left palm flat against the lower casing, closed her eyes for exactly 4 seconds. Then she opened them, looked at Marcus. The fracture isn't in the seal. Her voice was steady, almost gentle. It never was. The seal is failing as a result, but the origin point is inside the thermal sleeve, third partition from the base. It fractures under sustained heat, above 38 degrees Celsius. No standard diagnostic catches it, because the equipment was designed for cooler climates. This failure pattern doesn't exist in any published literature. She paused, because I'm the one who found it, and I never got the chance to publish. The smiles were gone. The German engineer slowly unfolded his arms. Marcus looked at his lead technician. You heard her. Third partition, thermal sleeve. His technician didn't move immediately. Sir, she's wrong. We're looking at another 6 months of. If she's wrong, Marcus said, we were already finished. He turned back to Grace. Take everything you need. This hangar is yours. Before we go back to the beginning, I need to ask you something. If you were Marcus Reed, a broken man, for $1 billion gone, 30 days before everything collapses, would you have let her in? Drop your answer below, yes or no, and tell me why. I read every single comment on this channel. Everyone. Let's see what this community thinks. 48 hours before Grace walked into that hangar, Marcus Reed was sitting alone in a glass office above the runway, watching an airline die. Not slowly, not quietly, the way empires die. Suddenly and all at once. His father had built Trans-Africa Airways from one aircraft and a borrowed hangar. In 1987, 31 years, 14 countries, 420 aircraft, the largest privately owned airline on the continent. And Marcus had inherited all of it. The name, the legacy, the debt. On the morning his father was buried. That was 3 years ago. The problem had started 6 months after the funeral. Engine failures. Not one, not two, 12. The same model, the same fault. Across 12 different aircraft. In 12 different cities. The pattern made no sense. The timing made no sense. The engineers made no sense of any of it. So Marcus did what any man with money does. When money is the only tool he knows, he spent it. He hired Gerhardt Engineering from Frankfurt, the finest aviation diagnostic firm in Europe. They arrived in white uniforms with silver cases and left 8 months later with $40 million and a report that said, fault origin undetermined. Further testing recommended. Marcus fired them on the day the report arrived. He hired Chim Pacific Aerospace from Singapore next. Younger team, better equipment, more confident. They lasted 11 months. Spent $62 million. Left without a solution and without returning his calls. Then came the Americans. Then the Emiratis. Then a joint team from 3 countries that could not agree on a single diagnosis. In 7 months of trying for $1 billion. 31 different lead engineers. 3 years of silence from every one of them. And 12 engines. Sitting in hangar 7. Like 12 dead men. Nobody could explain. The board had stopped being polite. 6 months ago, Marcus could still hear the chairman's voice. From the last meeting, we are giving you 30 days, Marcus. 30 days to show us a solution, or we begin liquidation proceedings. Your father built this airline. We will not allow his son to bury it. That meeting had been 27 days ago. 3 days left. Marcus stood up from his desk and walked to the window. Below him, the runway was half empty, routes suspended, tickets refunded, staff on reduced pay, 11,000 people, whose salaries depended on engines nobody could fix. His phone rang. He didn't look at it immediately. It rang again. He picked it up. Sir, it was Daniel, his night security supervisor. There's a woman outside gate 7 again. Marcus closed his eyes. He had heard this before. 3 times in the past 2 weeks. A homeless woman who kept appearing. Near the entrance to hangar 7. Security had moved her on each time. Gently. She never argued. Never caused trouble. She simply walked away. And came back the next morning. Same woman. Marcus asked. Yes, sir. She was there at 4 this morning. When I started my shift, I checked the cameras. She was there at midnight. At 2. At 3. Sir. Daniel hesitated. She's not just sitting there. She's been drawing something on the ground. Outside the gate. I think you should come and see it. Marcus looked down at the runway. One more time. 3 days. 11,000 people. 12 dead engines. I'm on my way. Daniel was a quiet man. 22 years in aviation security. He had seen everything airports collect. The desperate, the dangerous, the lost, and the broken. He was not a man who called his CEO. At midnight over a homeless woman. So when Marcus arrived at gate 7 and saw the look on Daniel's face, he knew immediately that something was different. How long has she been coming here? Marcus asked. 3 years, sir. Marcus turned to look at him. 3 years. Yes, sir. I recognize her about 8 months in. She doesn't bother anyone. Doesn't ask for food or money. She just stands there, watches the hangar, sometimes for hours. And nobody told me. It wasn't a question. Daniel looked at the floor. We assumed she was harmless, sir. We moved her on when we had to. She always left without trouble. I didn't think it was worth. Show me what she drew. Daniel led him to the concrete just outside the gate. The security lights were still on, bright enough to see clearly. Marcus crouched down slowly. She had drawn with a piece of broken glass, or a sharp stone, something small and hard, scraped directly into the surface of the concrete. But what she had drawn, Marcus had spent 3 years looking at engine schematics, hundreds of them, produced by the finest diagnostic teams money could hire. What was scratched into that concrete was more detailed than anything he had seen in 3 years of reports. Cross-sections of Engine 7's internal structure, heat distribution mapping, stress point indicators along the thermal sleeve, arrows, measurements, notations in the margins, written in a small, precise hand, pointing to the third partition from the base. All of it in the dark, with a piece of broken glass. On concrete, Marcus stood up slowly. He didn't speak for a long time. Where is she now? She left about an hour ago. Sir, same as always. She'll be back by morning. Marcus looked at the diagrams one more time. I want cameras on this gate tonight. Every angle. And I want someone here when she arrives. He paused. Not to move her on. To watch her. Don't approach. Don't disturb. Just watch and film everything. Yes, sir. And Daniel. Marcus looked at him. When she comes back, you call me personally. Whatever time it is. The call came at 4:17 in the morning. Marcus arrived at gate 7 in 12 minutes. She was there, sitting cross-legged on the concrete, working by the light of the security lamps, the same way she worked in the dark, without looking up, without noticing the camera, without noticing Marcus, standing 30 meters away, watching her through the gate. She was thin. Her clothes were old and worn. Her feet were bare against the cold concrete, but her hands moved with absolute certainty. No hesitation, no corrections. She drew each line once and moved to the next, the way a musician plays a piece they have known for 20 years. She was talking to herself, quietly, in a voice too low to hear clearly from a distance. Marcus looked at Daniel. Can we get audio? Daniel radioed the control room. 2 minutes later, a small directional microphone was pointed through the gate. They listened. Her voice was calm, technical. She was explaining the engine fault to no one, describing the heat fracture pattern, the origin point, the reason every diagnostic team had found the seal and stopped looking. Because the seal wasn't the problem. The seal was just where the problem ended up. She had known this. For how long? Marcus could not yet tell, but she had known it completely. He stood there in the cold for 40 minutes, listening to a barefoot woman on a concrete floor explain 3 years of failure, more clearly than any paid engineer had managed in 31 months of trying. When he finally turned away, he looked at Daniel. Who is she? Daniel shook his head slowly. We don't know, sir. She won't speak to anyone. No ID found. No record. Nobody on the local outreach registers has a name for her. Marcus looked back through the gate one last time. She was still drawing, still talking, still certain. Find out. He walked back to his car. In 3 years of looking for an answer, he had just heard it, spoken into empty air, outside a lock gate, at 4 in the morning, by a woman nobody knew, that nobody had thought to ask. Something tells me Grace's story goes much deeper than this airport, much deeper than these engines. If you are watching this for the first time, and you want to know who Grace really is, what was taken from her, and what happens when she finally steps inside, hit that subscribe button right now. Because when Grace finally speaks, inside that hangar, everything in this story changes, and you do not want to miss that moment. By 6 in the morning, Marcus had made his decision. He sat in his office with the security footage. Playing on his laptop for the 4th time, he watched her hands. He listened to her voice. He looked at the diagrams on the concrete. Then he picked up his phone and called his head of operations. Get the full engineering team into Hangar 7. 9 o'clock. Sir, the German consultants don't arrive until Thursday. I said the full team. Everyone we have on site. 9 o'clock. Yes, sir. And the agenda? Marcus looked at the footage one last time. We're going to open engine 7. The hangar was full by 8:50. 43 engineers. 6 nationalities. Laptops. Diagnostic equipment. Clipboards and certifications. And 3 years of shared failure. Standing in a room together. Pretending it belonged to someone else. Marcus walked in at 9 exactly. Nobody spoke. He stood at the front of the room and looked at them for a long moment. The man who had taken his money and given him nothing. He didn't look angry. He looked tired. The kind of tired that lives behind the eyes and doesn't leave with sleep. 3 years ago, he said quietly, my father's airline had 420 aircraft in the air. Today we have 396. 24 aircraft grounded, 12 because of engine 7's fault pattern, 12 more pulled for safety review, because we cannot explain what caused the first 12 to fail. In 3 years, we have spent $4 billion in this hangar. For billion, and engine 7 is in the same condition today as the day the fault was first reported. He let the silence sit. This morning I am trying something different. He nodded toward the door. Daniel opened it. Grace walked in. The room changed the moment she crossed the threshold. Not loudly, not with shock or outrage, just a shift, the kind that happens in a room when something enters that doesn't belong, and everyone knows it, and nobody knows what to do with that knowledge. She was wearing the uniform Marcus had arranged, clean, pressed. Her name tag said simply, Grace. No surname, no title, no department. Her feet were still bare. She had declined the boots. She walked directly to engine 7, without looking at anyone in the room, without slowing, without hesitation, like a woman returning to a desk she had left the night before. One of the senior engineers, a German named Klaus Brandt, stepped forward. Excuse me. His voice was measured, professional, the voice of a man who had managed difficult situations in difficult rooms for 30 years. May I ask what your credentials are? Your engineering certifications? Your diagnostic clearance level? Grace looked at him. Just looked, didn't answer. Turned back to engine 7. A younger engineer near the back said something in German to the man beside him. The man beside him smiled. Someone else laughed. Quietly, briefly, the way people laugh when they want to signal that they are not taking something seriously, without having to say it out loud. Marcus said nothing. He watched Grace. She stood before engine 7, the way someone stands before a door they have been locked out of for years. Still, reading it, her eyes moved across the casing, slowly and completely, starting at the base, working upward, stopping at certain points, moving on. Then she placed her left palm flat against the lower casing, held it there. The room watched. Someone coughed. Klaus Brandt spoke again. Mr. Reed, with the greatest respect, this equipment operates under international aviation safety protocols. The individuals authorized to work on this class of engine must hold a minimum level 4 aerospace certification from a recognized. She has been studying this engine for 3 years. Marcus's voice was quiet, almost gentle. From outside a gate, in the dark, without tools, without access, without salary. How long have you been studying it? Klaus said nothing. 11 months, $62 million. And you left without an answer. The room was very still. Marcus looked at Grace. What do you see? Grace lowered her hand from the casing, turned to face the room. For the first time since she had entered, when she spoke, her voice carried the quietness of someone who has rehearsed a moment 10,000 times and is finally inside it. The fault has been misdiagnosed. From the beginning, every team that came into this hangar identified seal deterioration and built their entire investigation around that finding. The seal is deteriorating. That part is correct, but the seal is not the source. It is the result. The origin point is inside the thermal sleeve, third partition from the base, under sustained operating heat, above 38 degrees Celsius, a heat level that is standard for flights over equatorial Africa. The partition material fractures along a stress line that does not appear in standard diagnostics. It does not appear because the diagnostic equipment was designed and calibrated for aircraft operating in cooler climates. The fracture closes again when an engine cools. So every post-flight inspection finds nothing. By the time the engine is opened for a full manual inspection, the fracture has sealed itself And the engineers look at a clean partition and write another report that says the same thing. Fault origin undetermined. She paused. I've watched 12 engines go through this cycle in this hangar from outside that gate for 3 years. The answer has not changed. The room was completely silent. Klaus Brandt cleared his throat. That is an interesting theory, but without evidence, without opening the engine, it remains speculation. If you are right, he paused, letting the weight of the words sit. Prove it. Open the engine. Show us the fracture. Grace looked at him. Then she looked at Marcus. Marcus held her gaze for a moment, nodded once. Grace turned back to engine 7. Then open it. Did you see what just happened? 43 engineers, 6 countries, for $1 billion, and a woman who studied that engine through a lock gate in the dark just described the fault more clearly than anyone in 3 years of trying. I want to know, what do you think Grace is feeling? Standing in that room right now? Is she angry at the men who laughed? Is she nervous that she might be wrong? Or has she been waiting for this exact moment for 6 years? And she already knows exactly what they're going to find inside that engine? Tell me in the comments. This one I genuinely want to know. I will be reading every single response. The tools were brought to her. Nobody spoke while they waited. The hangar had taken on the particular silence of a room full of people who have said too much and cannot take any of it back. Grace pulled on a pair of examination gloves, selected 3 tools from the tray. Without looking at the labels, she knew what she needed. Klaus Brandt stood 6 feet away, arms folded, watching. He had been one of the finest aviation diagnostic engineers in Europe for 22 years. He had opened this engine before. His team had opened it twice, found nothing of significance beyond the sealed deterioration that every other team had found. He was not angry. He was curious, in the way that competent people become curious when they encounter something they cannot immediately categorize. She was either right or she was wrong. Either way, Klaus Brandt would know within the hour which one it was. Grace removed the outer casing panel with clean, practiced movements. No instructions needed. No pause to consult a diagram. The engineers nearest to the engine leaned forward slightly. The involuntary movement of people whose attention has been caught against their own intentions. She reached the thermal sleeve, a layered assembly of heat-resistant material wrapped around the inner core of the engine, designed to regulate temperature during operation. She located the third partition from the base, pressed 2 fingers against the surface, closed her eyes for 7 seconds. Nobody breathed. Then she opened her eyes, reached for the thinnest tool on the tray, a fiber optic inspection probe, and inserted it into a gap along the edge of the partition. She angled the probe, adjusted, looked at the readout screen on the tray beside her. Then she turned the screen so Klaus could see it. He stepped forward, looked at the screen, his arms unfolded. On the screen, clear, unmistakable, running diagonally across the third partition, a fracture, hairline thin, perfectly sealed in the cold air of the hangar, invisible to any inspection, carried out after the engine had cooled, exactly where Grace had said it would be. Klaus looked at the screen for a long time. Then he looked at Grace. How did you know? His voice had changed. The professional distance was gone. He was asking a real question. Grace removed the probe carefully, set it back on the tray. She did not answer immediately. She began the precise, careful work of accessing partition fully, the process of actually repairing what she had found. And while she worked, she began to speak, not to Klaus, not to Marcus, not to the room, almost to herself, the way she had spoken. Outside the gate at 4 in the morning, there is an engineer in this field, or there was, who spent 4 years studying heat fracture patterns in equatorial aviation conditions. She flew on the routes herself, recorded temperature data at every altitude, at every time of day, in every season. She cross-referenced the data against engine failure reports across 11 African carriers. Over a 20-year period, she found the pattern, not in a laboratory, not in a diagnostic chamber, in the air, over the continent, where the engines actually live. She paused, kept working. She wrote up her findings, a full research paper, with the diagnostic protocol and the repair specification. She submitted it to her supervisor for peer review. A brief silence, and then she stopped, not dramatically, not for effect. She stopped the way people stop when a memory arrives, that the body needs a moment to carry. Then she continued working, quietly, precisely, and then something happened, and the research never reached publication, and she lost everything she had, and she ended up. She didn't finish that sentence. The room understood the ending. Marcus was watching her carefully. He had been watching her since the moment she walked in, not the way the engineers watched her, with assessment, with challenge, with the professional skepticism of people measuring her against a standard. He watched her the way you watch someone when you begin to understand that you are in the presence of a story much larger than the one you thought you were inside. He looked at Daniel, standing near the door. Daniel gave the smallest nod. There was more. There was significantly more. On the other side of the hangar, one of the younger engineers, a Nigerian man named Emeka, was looking at Grace with an expression no one else in the room had. Not surprise, not skepticism, recognition. He had heard something in the way she described the research, the route she described, the carriers she had cross-referenced, the method. He had read something years ago, a paper that circulated briefly in academic engineering circles before it disappeared. He pulled out his phone and began to search. His hands were shaking slightly. Up at the engine, Grace completed the first stage of the repair. She stepped back, looked at what she had done. The fracture in this partition can be stabilized with a titanium reinforcement sleeve, customized to the specific stress geometry of equatorial operating temperatures. Once installed, the seal will hold permanently. Every one of the 12 engines has the same fracture at the same partition. The repair specification is the same for all of them. She picked up a cloth, cleaned her hands, looked at Marcus. I can fix all 12, if you will let me. The hangar was completely silent. Marcus looked at Klaus. Klaus was still looking at the fracture on the screen. He looked up at Marcus slowly and nodded. They cleared the hangar at midday. Most of the engineers left quietly, without the usual noise of a team, breaking for lunch, without conversation. Klaus Brandt was the last to leave. He stopped at the door, turned back to look at Grace, still standing beside Engine 7. He opened his mouth, closed it again, and walked out. Marcus stayed. He pulled 2 chairs from against the wall and set them beside the engine. Sat in one, waited. Grace looked at the chair for a moment. Then she sat. The hangar was quiet now, just the 2 of them, and 12 engines, and the particular weight of everything that had just happened in this room. Marcus looked at his hands. The engineer you described, he said quietly, the one who spent 4 years studying the heat fracture patterns, who flew the routes herself, who wrote the research. He looked up. That was you. It wasn't a question. Grace looked at the floor for a long moment. Then she looked at him. My name is Grace Okonkwo. I graduated first in my class from the University of Lagos, Department of Aerospace Engineering. In 2004, I was offered a position at Continental Air Systems, one of Nigeria's largest carriers. I worked there for 9 years. In 2009, I began noticing a pattern of engine faults across our equatorial routes. Small faults, easily explained away individually, but I kept the records, all of them, for 4 years. By 2013, I had enough data to build a complete picture. I understood the fracture pattern. I understood why it happened. I understood how to fix it. I wrote the full research paper. Over 18 months. Every route, every temperature reading, every failure report, every calculation. 240 pages. I submitted it to my supervisor, Dr. Emmanuel Adeyemi, for internal review, before external publication. She stopped, the way she always stopped. When this part of the story arrived, he told me the paper needed revision. He asked me to leave the full file on his system for his notes. I did. 3 weeks later, he submitted the research to an international aviation journal under his name. He removed my name entirely, changed the formatting, altered the data headers. But the research was mine. Every word, every number, every finding. Marcus said nothing. I reported it to the company, to the board, to the industry regulatory body. Dr. Adeyemi had been with the company for 26 years. I had been there for 9. Within 2 months, I was accused of stealing company equipment, falsifying maintenance records, creating fraudulent research, using company data without authorization. Every accusation was built from paperwork that had been altered after the fact. I could not prove what had been changed. My engineering license was suspended, pending investigation. The investigation lasted 14 months. At the end of it, my license was revoked permanently. I was blacklisted across the industry. No carrier in the country would hire me. No firm, no consultancy, no institution. Dr. Adeyemi's paper was published in the International Journal of Aviation Engineering. In 2015, he received an industry award for it. In 2016, I was sleeping on the streets of Lagos. By the end of 2015, the hangar was very still. Marcus looked at her for a long time. And you came here? I followed the engines. Grace said simply. His paper was published, but the repair specification was incomplete. He didn't understand the full solution. He only understood what he could steal. So the fault was still out there, in every engine operating equatorial routes. I kept looking for where it would appear. When Transafrica started reporting failures, I came to this airport because I knew what was wrong, and I knew nobody else did, and I kept coming back. Her voice dropped very slightly, because this is where my work lives. Inside engines nobody could fix, because nobody had my full research. Only I have that. In here. She pressed 2 fingers against the side of her head. Marcus looked at engine 7. Looked back at Grace. 6 years. He said quietly. She nodded once. 6 years. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of everything a person carries when the world takes something from them that can never fully be replaced. Marcus stood up slowly. He picked up his phone. Dialed. Give me the legal team. All of them. My office. 1 hour. Yes, all of them. He ended the call. Looked at Grace. You are not sleeping outside. That gate again. From tonight, you have a room in the staff residence. Full access to this hangar. Every resource this airline has. And tomorrow morning, we start finding Dr. Emmanuel Adeyemi. Grace spent 6 years on the streets. Not because she lacked ability. Not because she lacked intelligence. Not because she didn't work hard enough. But because one man in a position of power looked at everything she built and decided it belonged to him, and the system believed him. If you know someone right now, a friend, a family member, someone in your community whose gifts have been buried by someone who should have protected them, share this story with them today. Not tomorrow. Today. Because Grace almost gave up. She came close. Closer than the story shows. And somebody watching this right now needs to hear that their gift has not expired. That what was taken can still be recovered. Share this right now before you continue. The legal team arrived within the hour. 5 of them, senior partners, the kind of lawyers who do not come to meetings unless the meeting matters. Marcus placed Grace's case before them, without preamble. The stolen research, the falsified accusations, the revoked license, the published paper under Adeyemi's name. He laid the concrete diagrams on the table, photographed, preserved, time-stamped by the security system. He played the audio from Gate 7, Grace's voice in the dark, describing the fracture pattern in precise technical detail, months before any engineer inside the hangar had come close to the same conclusion. He showed them the repair, completed that morning, documented by 43 engineers who had watched it happen, and could not explain how a barefoot woman with no tools had found in 4 hours what $4 billion could not find in 3 years. The senior partner, a sharp-eyed woman named Mrs. Folake Briggs, studied the evidence and then studied Grace for a long, quiet moment. Dr. Adeyemi is still practicing? He became head of engineering in 2017. Grace said. Mrs. Briggs set down her pen. Miss Okonkwo, the statute of limitations on intellectual property theft does not begin from the date of the theft. It begins from the date the injured party became aware they had legal standing to pursue it. You have standing, clear standing. We file within the week. She looked at Marcus. We will also pursue full reinstatement of her engineering license. Given what happened in this hangar today, I do not expect resistance. Grace was looking at the table when Mrs. Briggs finished speaking, not with relief, not yet with the careful stillness of someone who has learned the hard way that good news must be allowed to arrive slowly. 6 years is a long time to protect yourself from hope. Dr. Emmanuel Adeyemi received a legal notice on a Thursday morning. By Friday afternoon, his lawyers had contacted Marcus. A private settlement, significant money, full confidentiality, no admission of wrongdoing, no public record. Grace's name stayed buried. Adeyemi's name stayed clean. Marcus read the offer once, set it down on his desk, picked up the phone. Tell them no. Mr. Reed, the sum they are offering, tell them no. Grace Okonkwo's name goes back onto that research. Her license is reinstated. Publicly, Dr. Adeyemi faces a full regulatory process. On the record, every word of it. A pause. She fixed what $4 billion couldn't. He stole from her, and he stole from this industry. There is no private settlement for that. Dr. Emmanuel Adeyemi stole Grace's research in 2013, published it under his own name, received an award for it, was promoted for it, and for 6 years, while Grace slept outside airport gates, he sat in a warm office with her work framed on his wall. I want to know what you think his punishment should be, not what the law says, what you think is right. Drop it in the comments. No filter. Say exactly what you think. The most powerful response gets pinned to the top of this video. I will choose it personally. The case took 8 months. The regulatory board reviewed the original research files, the time-stamped security footage, the audio recordings from Gate 7, the testimony of 43 engineers from 6 countries who had watched Grace diagnose and repair Engine 7. In a single morning, Dr. Emmanuel Adeyemi lost his engineering license. On a Wednesday, Grace Okonkwo had hers reinstated. On the same day, her name was formally added to the original research paper, not as a contributor, not as a co-author, as the sole author. The International Journal of Aviation Engineering issued a full correction. The award Adeyemi had received in 2016 was withdrawn. The other 11 engines took Grace 4 months to repair. All 12 aircraft were back in the air. By the following year, Trans-Africa Airways reported its most profitable quarter in the history of the airline. Marcus stood at the press conference on the day the results were announced and said only one thing about how it had happened. We spent $4 billion looking for an answer. The answer was sleeping outside our door. We almost chased her away. On the morning after the press conference, before the interviews, before the photographs, before the industry wanted to claim her as one of their own, Grace walked out onto the runway alone, not in her old clothes, not barefoot, white uniform, name badge, clean hands. She stood on the same runway she had slept beside, looked at Hangar 7, at the gate where she had crouched, in the dark for 3 years, with a piece of broken glass, and a mind that refused to let go of what it knew. She didn't cry. She just stood there for a long time, In the early morning quiet, a woman who had lost everything, except the one thing nobody could take, and the world had finally run out of reasons to pretend it wasn't there. Grace never stopped believing in what she carried, even when the world gave her every reason to, even when she had no floor to sleep on, except the concrete outside the door of the thing they took from her. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of someone, or if it reminded you of yourself, leave the word grace in the comments below, just that one word, and watch what this community does with it. If you are not subscribed yet, this is your moment. Every week on this channel, we bring you stories like this. Stories of people the world overlooked, people who were counted out, people whose gifts were buried by someone who should have protected them. Stories that remind you that your gift has not expired. Subscribe now, turn on the notification bell, and I will see you in the next story.